Morning, one and all. As we enter into the day two of this knowledge dissemination session, I have the privilege of inviting the first speaker for the day, Mr. Piyush Ketan. Mr. Piyush Ketan is the chairman of the Airmail Society India Foundation and chairman PCI Philatelic Trust. He was elected as the Fellow of the PCI and the Royal Philatelic Society, London. He is a convener of the AMSIPEX, the International Virtual Aerophilatelic and Astrophilatelic Exhibition under the patronage of FISA and PCI. His Indian Crash Mail exhibit won the Champion of the Champions award in Amritpex 2023, and the exhibit on Indian airmails won gold in Uruguay 2025 under the patronage of FIP. His lecture today is on Indian airmail. The purpose is to provide the audience an overview which will enable non-collectors to start collecting and others to further develop their collection and exhibit, to enjoy viewing aerophilatelic exhibits and read more literature on the subject. It will cover the first 40 years of the Indian airmail and provide valuable tips on the subject. While I have the privilege of calling Mr. Piyush Ketan here, this man has dedicated on one subject all his life, collecting airmail and perhaps teaching each one of us a lot about airmail. I once again have the privilege of inviting Piyush Ketan.
This is going to be a long lecture. I had a big problem what to include, what not to include, how to do it. So finally I requested Pratisad for 2 hours. So you have to put up with me for the next 2 hours. And if at any time, you find it a little boring, choose to step out, I'll perfectly understand. So with that, we will start in our traditional Om Sahana Bhavatu. Whoever is interested can please chant along.
Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
So I have structured this talk basically into 6 chapters, which will take you through the first 40-50 years of Indian airmail. And the purpose is again to just give an overview. It's impossible to go deeper in any kind of detail here. So can I just have a show of hands? How many people here collect airmail? Yeah. In some, who have at least a single airmail cover in their collection? Okay, fantastic. Great. So I'm really hoping that at the end of this talk, those who have airmail material but don't consider themselves aerophilatelist will go deeper into the subject, and I'll feel very, very satisfied if that happens. So that is the whole idea. The purpose is again here today is to give you an overview of Indian airmails. It is not to show off any rarities or special material. There will be few rarities in this, but that's part of the story. The idea is more to just build familiarity and understanding, so that as you encounter the material, as you go along, there'll be a context available to you. So in order to build a logical flow, it's not entirely chronological. What I have taken is certain chapters, so there'll be a little bit of back and forth. Please bear with me, but I thought that's the best way to tell the story. And the other, of course, is I will be referring to places in a more contemporaneous matter. So Mumbai, for example, will be Bombay if an event happened at that time, or Kolkata will be Calcutta in the exhibit, which is the normal convention when we do these kind of talks. So we'll start with the origin, where it all started. The first postally sanctioned airmail flight anywhere in the world, and that happened the 1911 Allahabad Naini flight. I hope I'm clearly audible. I find there's a big distance. Yeah, okay. So this was 18th February 1911, an event which was just 6 or 7 years after the White brothers first flew in the air, and that was a flight which I think lasted 6 or 7 seconds. But aeroplanes originated there, and just 6 or 7 years later, we had this occasion of the first airmail, postally sanctioned airmail flight in history ever happening, and this happened in Allahabad, across the river Jamuna. The Allahabad exhibition was being held at the fort, and at that time this gentleman, Captain Wyndham, he used to work for the Humber Motor Car Company. He came to India with a few of his aeroplanes in crates to show them around and to book orders. Was given instructions, proceed to Allahabad. There's an exhibition there, best place to show the plane. A creative person that he was, he thought up this idea of the first airmail flight. So there was a Oxford and Cambridge hostel there as part of the college. They wanted money to build a new roof. So he decided to raise some money for them. They convinced the postmaster general and the postmaster there to allow mail to be carried, which was officially sanctioned. So what we see here is it's not a postal notice. This is some kind of a leaflet that was prepared and distributed, but it gives in great detail almost everything that you want to know about the intended flight. So for example, the special cancellation that you see here, this was prepared at the workshop in Aligarh. It was affixed at the exhibition ground in Allahabad. Mail that was bearing this postmark was carried on the flight. 6,500 postal articles were carried there. And immediately after this event, the postmark was defaced to maintain the rarity and the importance of this particular special occasion. So this was done. Money that was raised, there was a 6 anna fee that was to be paid to send mail on this flight from Allahabad to Naini and onward from Naini to any destination. So in addition to the ordinary postage rate, you had to pay this 6 anna air fee, and this 6 anna went as a donation to the hostel. No money was retained either by the postal department or by the organizers other than the normal postal rate. What I find particularly sad is such a historic occasion happened in India. People don't know about it anywhere in the world. Today when I talk to people, so many in India, but definitely abroad in USA, in Britain, where did the first airmail happen? They don't know. It's a surprise to them that it happened in India. Oh, India, I could not imagine. I would have thought America, Britain, Germany, but it happened here. And who do we blame for it? Ourselves. Today at Allahabad Fort, where this happened, at Allahabad Airport, there is not even a small plaque commemorating this. No part of the government, whether the Department of Post, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the Ministry of Culture, has done very much about promoting this. We take so much pride in our achievements as a nation. I wish we can do something more to even build this story. This is truly something to be proud of. It's a first in the world. 6,500 postal articles were carried, so nothing rare. Getting material flown on this is pretty easy, quite available, and it forms the starting point of any airmail collection for anybody anywhere in the world. If you collect airmail, you have to start with this. There is no other, like you say, penny black. All stamp collections start, this is in that category. You see on the left hand side, this is a postcard that was specially prepared for this, and it is signed by the pilot Henri Piquet, who flew the mail from Allahabad to Naini. Jeffrey Brown in his book mentions that about 40 were there. We have recorded a little over 70 already. My guess is it will be close to 100. So we are still continuing work on the census to try to record each and every one of these covers that was flown. Very, very collectible. This is a little difficult to get, but it's good for collectors to look for. What you see on the right is the black dye. Now the cancellation that was used was in magenta. The black was experimental. This was used on a postcard, maybe just to show how it will be defaced, where the Allahabad mark will be put, etc. So these were made. And on the reverse of this, if you see, in Wyndham's handwriting, he's written with the founder's compliment. So he always called himself the founder of Aerial Post. And he says the only ones done in black. And he has signed it. So this was the first airmail that happened. After 1911, nothing happened for many years. So we will now go on to development of airmail as we go along. Now, for Britain at that time, what was very important was communication. How do we build speedy communication from Britain to the rest of the British Empire? And after World War I, World War I was a big catalyst for development of aeroplanes, which were used for military purposes, whether for bombing, whether for troop transportation, whether for surveillance. Whole lot of development was done for aeroplanes. Even they were produced in large quantities. So once the war got over, a lot of these surplus planes, they started looking for other uses. Nobody thought of airmail very much. But then they realized that there are ways that we can use this to develop speedy communications through the empire. So the first thing to do was to survey the routes, etc. And therefore, one of the very early survey flights was in November 1918. Again, just towards the end of World War I. So Brigadier General Boughton, he left from Cairo, and his idea was to fly all the way to Calcutta. And he carried a few pieces of mail with him. Along with him on the flight, the pilot was Captain Ross Smith, and we'll come back to Ross Smith later, Australian pilot, who did a lot of legendary work, including setting up ANA, that airline he and his partner Ulm had set up later. So Ross Smith was the pilot, and the Major General Jeff Salmond was on the flight, who later became Air Marshal. These were the people who developed a lot of the early airmail routes, etc. So the cover you see here on the top left, this is the one that went from Cairo all the way to Karachi. The flight continued to Delhi, Allahabad, and then to Calcutta. So it bears the cachet, being the first aerial airmail service, Cairo to Karachi, and there's a date, I think it says 10th December 1918. And you see the censorship mark at Karachi. So censorship was still on, the World War I censorship at that time when the plane landed. Then what we see here is the first through airmail from Britain to India. This was a plane called the Old Carthusian. It was a Handley Page 1500 which flew. And this one left from England, from Martlesman Heath, all the way to India. It reached up to Omara on the Makran coast, where it crashed. So the last leg to Karachi, the mail was taken by ship by HMS Britomart to complete the journey. And then upon arrival at Karachi, the cover was posted there, and it bears the Karachi cancellation. The Australian government had ordered, and these flights are very significant for Indian airmail simply because these are the people who took extensive notes of the route, the landing facility, what needs to be done to develop infrastructure and things like that. The Australian government offered a prize of £10,000 to the first Australian who would fly from England to Australia. So many people tried, but Captain Ross Smith and his brother Keith Smith, they were on a Vickers Vimy biplane, and they were the first people to complete the journey. So they left in late 1919, and again they flew via India. So they flew to Karachi, Delhi, Calcutta, etc., and made their way through Burma, etc., on to Australia. So here, about 11 covers have been recorded which originated in India and went on the flight. So this is one of those. And the stamp that you see here, this one, this was affixed upon arrival in Australia at Sydney, at Melbourne, much later, and got the cancellation. The first airmail service in India started as an experiment. And I just want to go back 1 minute. The 1911 flight that I talked about, we have a wonderful 30-minute video on that by Mr. Pradeep Jain, which is on our YouTube channel. I'll share the link as we go along the talk. But he talks with great authority and shows items, absolutely phenomenal items from his collection in that. The one I talked in the next slide about the route discovery from Britain, the early flights, etc. Again, that is covered in a video by Pragya Jain, which is on the same YouTube channel. And he talks a lot about those. So I would encourage those who are interested and want to know more, you can easily watch that. The 1920 RAF flight. So you had this RAF squadron in India. These were positioned mostly on the northwest border between India, what is now Pakistan, the northwest frontier province, Risal, Poone, Nowshera, etc., for the Afghanistan, to protect the border with Afghanistan. A lot of these planes became surplus, and they decided to start an experimental mail service between Karachi and Bombay. So what would happen is the P&O steamer with mail from Britain would arrive in Bombay. The rail route, the surface route from Bombay to Karachi was very cumbersome because of the run of Kutch and the desert and all of that. It had to go through a circuitous route. So the BISN, British India Steamship and Navigation Company, had a mail service going from Bombay all the way to Basra, which would stop at Karachi. Mail used to go that way. To accelerate that, they started this mail service. There was a 8 anna air fee you had to pay to send mail. So the normal surface rate plus 8 anna extra, which was an exorbitant amount. It was a failure. 7 flights happened between 23rd January and March, after which it was abandoned. So what we see here, and it had an overnight halt in Rajkot. So mail would leave Karachi in the afternoon, halt overnight at Rajkot, go the next morning to Bombay. Similarly, once the steamer came, it would leave Bombay in the afternoon, halt at Rajkot and go to Karachi in the evening. So what we see on the left is a cover from Karachi, 23rd January on the first flight. And what we see on the right, and I really like this because this is not a philatelic cover, this is actual commercial mail. I don't know, I've not calculated here right now how much it is, but quite heavily franked because of the weight, etc., which is on the first flight from Bombay to Karachi. And you see here the plane that was used on the flight. Then, of course, the question was developing the route between England and India. Mail from Britain to go up to Cairo was not very difficult. That had been well researched, well developed, etc. The problem was from Cairo to Baghdad, because you had Syria to go through, you had all of Iraq to go through, very hostile territory, both politically. It was all in the control of different tribes. They were, all the time fighting with each other. They were very hostile to other people. The terrain was terrible. There was no proper navigation aids. How do you do this? So finally the Royal Air Force, they actually took a tractor and they put like a snow plow in front of the tractor, and they plowed a route through the entire desert, and they marked landing points, they marked fuel depots, etc., to allow planes to fly in a safer way, because there was no other way they could navigate. And the RAF then started this commercial service, which was essentially for mail to Iraq. So Cairo to Baghdad was the airmail service they started, which they ran from 1921 to 26. But this was very important to lay the foundations for an airmail service to India. Alan Cobbin was given the job of charting the route for Imperial Airways to be able to fly to India. So he came in 1925 and started his survey flight from England to India, and again took extensive notes, identified places for landing strips, which helped to develop the civil aviation infrastructure in our country. where the planes would land all the way to Calcutta. What we see here is a return cover carried by him on this survey flight from Calcutta to England, prepared by this label. And you'll see a lot of this has been prepared by Stephen Smith. Stephen Smith is a name we come across very often in years of early Indian airmail. We owe a great deal to him. It is this one man who has documented so much about early Indian civil aviation history, prepared covers, flown them. A lot would have been lost if it was not for him. Now, the British were not alone. In fact, I would say the British were always one step behind. The French and the Dutch, Air France and KLM, were the pioneers as far as airmail, and of course Lufthansa, but Germans had very little interest in the East. They were more interested in Europe. But the French had interest in Indochina, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, etc., French Indochina. The Dutch had interest in the Dutch East Indies. And for them to develop commercial mail from the Netherlands, from France to their colonies in Asia was very important. They were always actually one step ahead, and we will see during the presentation the work that they did and how the British always had to play catch up to what they were doing. The big thing working for the British was India was in between, which was a British colony, so they would use that politically to leverage, to give permission, deny permission, to play their games, to somehow or the other keep up with what the French and the Dutch were doing. So on the left we have this cover by Etienne Poulet and Benoit. They were the two pilots who went in this Squadron G4 aircraft, and they flew all the way from France, from Issy-les-Moulineaux. They flew all the way to, they attempted to fly to French Indochina. They did manage to reach India. So they flew Gwadar, Karachi, Nasirabad, Delhi, Allahabad, Calcutta. They reached Calcutta on 25th November of 1919. Then they went on towards, they managed to reach Burma. But when they were flying to Bangkok, in Molemin, the plane crashed and the flight had to be abandoned. But they were able to reach up to there, so they got for themselves extensive information on the routes, on the landing strips, etc., which was later used by Air France to develop their routes. The Dutch, similarly, the first flight was again in 1927, all the way from Amsterdam to Batavia. Batavia is the old name for Jakarta. So they flew from Amsterdam to Batavia. And the cover you see here is carried actually on that flight from Calcutta to Batavia. There were about, I think, 33 covers or 43 covers that were flown on that flight. The Dutch also very quickly got permission for 5 experimental flights to fly over India to the Dutch East Indies. So what you see here at the right bottom is the first flight from Amsterdam, which is addressed to Bombay. But it's very interesting, if you see on the top the instruction he's given, he says, it says by airmail, Amsterdam, Allahabad, Batavia. So the route was never to go to Bombay. So it was offload this mail at Allahabad, send it to Bombay by surface, while I am continuing to Batavia.
Yeah. So I have a very basic question. It may be sounding very ridiculous to you, you being an expert and me being a novice here. That the covers which you are showing, the first flight and especially, covers, especially, like having all the right caches and all. My question too is, after this first flight covers, there had been some continuation on these flights, or it was a one-off incidents or one-off kind of a flight? Yeah. That's the question.
No, it's a great question. So if you see what I have shown here so far are one-off flights. These are survey flights to discover the route and things like that. If you see we talked about the 1920 Bombay-Karachi airmail. So that was a scheduled service. There were 7 flights, all carried mail. As we proceed with this talk, we will go into the scheduled flights, and there, they flew many times, they continued, a lot of mail was flown. So we're going to come to that as well.
Right. So at this point of time, we are talking about pioneering flights.
Yes. We are still on chapter
1929, we are in 1929. So till that time, you mean to say that there were no scheduled regular flights carrying airmail?
Okay. So as I said, there's going to be a little back and forth in this presentation.
Okay.
So I'm not going strictly chronologically. So there was, for example, the 1927 Cairo Basra.
Right.
So we're going to come to that when we come to the chapter on commercial flights.
Sure. Thanks.
The French and the Dutch were not the only two people competing with the British. There were several others who also, different countries, this was like space exploration today, the space race. America, Russia, China, India, everybody wants to be in space. If you go back a few centuries for shipping, each country, they demonstrated their power by their shipping fleet, by the countries they sailed to, they discovered. It was the same with air. So you had the French, the Dutch, the British. Now you see here on the left is the cover from the Italian, Marquis de Penedo. Again, it was an Air Force flight. He was entirely financed by the government. And he flew all the way from Italy to Australia and then went on to reach Tokyo. So he went through India, and this was in 1925. His route was very interesting. He actually came to Karachi, and he was on a seaplane. So he then went along the west coast of India, Bombay, Kokunada, etc., came around the tip of India and then flew to Calcutta, went on there. So it's a very interesting, it's an odd cover that you see, just half of it. So Stephen Smith had made a deal with him to carry some mail. Apparently when it reached the other end, he was promised 10 pounds to sign the cover. Nobody gave him the money. So he cut off his signature and kept that with him. So what is surviving is only the half of the cover that he left behind. So even Sydney, for example, you can see just the EY of the Sydney here. Similarly, this is a cover flown by the Danish pilots who went in 1926. Again, they flew all the way to Tokyo. The Spaniards had their own colony in the Philippines, and for them it was important to develop routes to the Philippines. But the important thing is India was the halfway house. You could not reach anywhere in east without flying through India. And so we have so much richness of airmail that has passed through the country, so much development of our airport infrastructure because of that. So here we have a cover which is flown from Calcutta to Manila on the Spanish flight. So this is just an overview of some of the pioneering flights. There are many, many more. There is no end to it. We'll now go to commercial airmail. So, and by the way, the 1920 Bombay-Karachi airmail again, there is an excellent video, a talk by Max Smith on this subject, which is again on our YouTube channel. Those who are interested to know more should watch that. The Basra-Cairo airmail was started in 1927. So Imperial Airways took over the desert service from RAF. We talked about the RAF Cairo-Baghdad flight 1921 to 26. 1st January 1927, the route was taken over by Imperial Airways and they flew. So coming to your question about commercial airmail, this is really the start of the commercial airmail. What they also did was extended it to Basra. Now suddenly this became important for India because mail from Karachi, mail from northwest part of India to reach Bombay and then to go on the P&O steamer. The P&O steamer used to leave every Saturday. Sorry, it used to leave every Sunday from Bombay to go to Britain. So the mail had to be cut off in Karachi on Thursday. And then it would take the BSIN steamer from Karachi to Bombay and then go on the P&O there. All of a sudden, because of this flight, they could actually send the mail 2 days later. So instead of Thursday and leaving Bombay on Sunday, they could send it on Tuesday. So they accelerated mail by 4 to 5 days. And it would go from Karachi to Basra on the same steamer. And from Basra, it would go on this flight and connect up at Cairo and then go on the P&O steamer. So people who collect 1927 Cairo Basra, please, if you see a cover postmarked Bombay, it is rubbish. It is of no, as a collector you may keep it, but it is of no postal importance. Because mail from Bombay on this flight did not gain any advantage to the sender. It is mail from Karachi and from northwest of India, which really gained advantage on this flight. So the first flight happened in January 1927. And you will notice this magenta cachet that was used to cancel airmail service Basra Cairo. Then in September, this was replaced with the circular by air cancellation. This was used, and also the postal department introduced the airmail labels for the first time. So the blue airmail label you see, these were introduced in 1927, and they were given free of cost. You just have to go to the post office, ask for the label, take it, affix it. It helped in sorting. The people sorting the mail could easily identify and make sure that it was processed. In 1929, Imperial Airways finally extended the route all the way to Karachi. Karachi was the entry point for India, and as far as Imperial Airways is concerned, that was also the end point. The government of India did not permit Imperial Airways to operate mail services within India. They said, that is my privilege as government of India. I may be a colony of Britain, but I am government of India and I will do what is of interest to India. So they said, you can bring mail up to Karachi, you have to hand it over to me in Karachi, I will distribute it within India. Similarly, I will collect mail from all over India, deliver it to you in Karachi. They could not extend all this time because from Baghdad, from Basra, to reach India, you had to stop in Iran. The Germans had tremendous influence with the Persian government, and they had denied permission for these Imperial Airways aircraft to land. So it took 2 years to negotiate. Finally, they got permission, and in March 1927, the commercial flight started from England to Karachi, and 4th April 1927 was the first return flight. So we see here the Handley page, and if you see at the bottom, it writes Drigg Road. Drigg Road was the name of the airport in Karachi, the Drigg Road airport, where it was a RAF base. It was also then started to be used for civilian and commercial flights. So here we see a mail carried on the first flight from London to Karachi. It's signed by the pilot, Captain Wilkinson. And the maps you see below are actually showing the route all the way from London all the way to Karachi. The maps are shown here with the permission of Peter Vincent. They are in his book. And I must caution anybody using these images of his. He's a very cranky guy. I remember the first time I posted a map without his permission, I got such a dirty letter, I immediately deleted it, apologized to him. I think he cooled down and wrote back to me. He says, no, please go ahead and use it. So anyway, so this is on the right, you see the first cover on the flight, return flight, Karachi to Croydon. So this was the first airmail from India to England. And it was not one plane that flew. So you had these Hannibal class planes which would fly from India all the way up to Egypt. Alexandria, it was then transferred to the Short brothers seaplanes flown across the Mediterranean all the way to Genoa. Italians for some reason did not allow mail to be flown over Italy, so it was taken by train to Basel, and from Basel it was flown again in an Armstrong brothers plane all the way to Croydon. So it changed 3 times to be able to get there. The flight took 7 days. 4th November was the issue of the first airmail stamps. So 5 stamps were issued on 4th November. The values were 3 anna, 4 anna, 6 anna, 8 anna, 12 anna. 3 annas because that was the airmail rate for Iraq. Also, the Indian Postal Department had come up with a very interesting arrangement with Australia Post. So there was an airmail service from Perth to Adelaide. So they said you can send a letter with the surface mail rate, add another 3 annas, and it will go by ship to Perth, and then it will go by air from Perth all the way to Adelaide. So mail to Sydney, Melbourne, etc. got accelerated by 2 more days. So the 3 anna stamp was for that. 4 anna was for mail to Egypt and to Palestine. 6 anna was to Europe and to Britain. And the 8 and 12 anna were for overweight letters. So the second weight stage, this was per half ounce. So you didn't have to buy 2 stamps. For the cost of 1 stamp, you could have done it. And on the right, we see the first day cover, 4th November 1929, Calcutta to England, with these stamps that were issued. In 1931, the British realized that finally we are getting significantly less left behind, because KLM had already extended their airmail all the way to the Dutch East Indies. So they were flying through India, they were not permitted to drop mail and pick up mail in India. That was a monopoly of the India Post, and the British did not allow that to happen. But they were given permission to fly. The French had already started flights to Indonesia. The Dutch had formed another airline called KNILM, Dutch, the Royal Dutch East Indies Airways. These people were operating flights out of Indonesia. They were negotiating arrangements with Australia for air. Then the British realized, oh my God, I'm getting left behind, let's do something. So then they said to do route survey. They did these experimental flights. Again, this flight was done by Imperial Airways only up to Singapore. In Singapore, the mail was handed over to Qantas, and then it was handed over to ANA, who took the mail from Singapore to, I stand corrected, they took the mail up to Darwin. It was handed over in Darwin to Qantas, who took it up to Brisbane, and ANA, who then took it to Sydney and Melbourne. So these were the two experimental flights that were done. But the good thing is they used these flights to plan all the routes through India, across India and Burma. And this came in very, very handy later. So you see here a cover from India going from Karachi all the way to Brisbane, and a return flight cover from Australia all the way to England. The other very big development was in 1937. In 1937, Britain launched the Empire Airmail Scheme. This was done in 3 phases. So the first phase was in 1937, where for the price of a surface letter, the mail would travel by air to all the way up to Egypt. So you did not have to pay the extra airmail surcharge, which was very heavy. The air fee was waived. This was extended in the second phase to East Africa, South Africa, India and Malaya. So in February 1938, for the cost of an ordinary letter, so 2.5 anna was the ordinary letter rate from India to Britain. The air fee at that time was another 7.5 annas. So you didn't have to pay that. Just for 2.5 anna, mail would travel to Britain, and sea mail had stopped after that. For the first class mail was all sent by air. Similarly, the return mail from Britain was only 1.5 pence. This gave a huge boost to airmail. So flights that were happening once a week, twice a week, suddenly the flights started happening daily. In fact, very quickly after that, they started a second service which terminated in Calcutta. We'll come to that also in a minute. And later on that year, in July, they extended it, the phase 3, which extended to Australia and New Zealand. So you see here a cover which has gone from India all the way to New Zealand in the phase 3. And again, just at the surface letter rate. So these were very big boosts to the development of airmail. I talked about Government of India rule about not allowing foreign airlines to do mail services in India. That applied to Imperial Airways as well. The Government of India did not permit Imperial Airways to do this. So we had our own airlines, and we'll come to that in the inland section, but Indian State Air Service, Indian Transcontinental Airways, etc. were formed, who carried the mail within India. So the problem was, how do we bypass this? So the British came up with this brilliant idea. They said, this Indian transcontinental Indian space, they don't have the seaplane ability. They only have land planes. They can only fly on land. So they said, let us get permission for a seaplane service all the way from England to Australia. So they did this, they did a few survey flights, the flying boat. These were built by Short brothers. The Coogee comes here, and the Coogee therefore flies, it only lands and takes off on water. So the route is Karachi. From Karachi it goes to Udaipur, which is Rajsamand, it goes to Gwalior. From Gwalior it goes to Allahabad, lands in the Jamuna, and then the Hooghly in Calcutta, and flies on to Australia. So what they did was they used, once this was successful, all the mail to Australia was sent via seaplanes, and the land service which was operated by ITCA terminated in Calcutta. So by that time we started having almost 8 or 9 flights every week from England to India. Of course, World War II changed all of that, and we'll come to that later. Again, The French and the Dutch, not to be left behind, always one step ahead. So while the British were still trying to figure out what to do, they got similar permission that I can start carrying mail intended for India. I will deliver it to the India Post in Karachi. They will distribute it. And similarly, all mail going to the east, to Indochina, etc., for the French, or to Indonesia for the Dutch and onward, I will pick up in Calcutta. So the first flights they were permitted to do this was in 1932. So in October 1932, this is the first official airmail from Calcutta to Saigon carried by Air France, and similarly from Calcutta to Batavia carried by KLM. So this permission was given to them in 1932. At that time, Imperial Airways and their partner in India, Indian State or Indian Transcontinental, only flew up to Delhi. There was no flight beyond Delhi. These people had already crossed Calcutta and they were going to the east. So again, why I say this is, as airmail collectors, we often ignore the importance of some of these other airlines. We focus a lot on Imperial Airways mail. There is so much to study and enjoy here. Anyway, now we'll move to the next chapter, early days of internal airmail in India. What happens after the mail is delivered in Karachi? So the first step was to extend the service to Karachi. So the Indian State Air Service was formed. The Government of India rule was only Indian Airlines can carry the mail. So this was a sham that was played by Imperial Airways. On paper, Indian State Air Service was an Indian airline, but the ownership was entirely British. The aircraft was entirely owned by Imperial Airways. The crew and ground handling was entirely Imperial Airways. But nevertheless, they started the air service to Delhi. So this was a flight from Karachi via Jodhpur to Delhi. And they would also stop at Hyderabad, Sindh on the way. So the 2 Anna stamp was then introduced in 20th December. The 2 Anna was the internal air fee to be paid. So we see here the stamp. We also see a first day cover here signed by Grant, who was the designer of the stamp, which flew on the first airmail flight. And what you see here is the first flight from Karachi to Delhi. So this flight carried about 40 pounds of mail and picked up only 1 pound of mail on the way. So again, covers which were picked up in Hyderabad, covers that were picked up in Jodhpur, they become suddenly very interesting. So what we see here is a cover postmarked Jodhpur, addressed to Nagpur. So it flew from Jodhpur to Delhi and then did the Delhi-Nagpur leg by surface. So this went on. The Indian State Air Service flew for 2 years, 1930, 1931, and it folded up. It just could not work out. And then the first Indian airline started. So I have a question for you. Who was the first Indian pilot? The first, and this is, sorry? Right. Prabhu Dutt Sharma. After Indian State Air Service folded up in December 1931, the Delhi Flying Club, here is a small flying club with 2 pussmoths. They took on the entire might of the Imperial Airways. And for 1.5 years, they flew mail from Karachi to Delhi with these 2 planes. And Prabhu Dutt Sharma was the pilot. Out of 158 flights, they completed 153. Mind you, no radar, no radio beacon, the fog that happens in Delhi, the heat that happens, the Indian monsoon, the dust storms. Through all of that, for 1.5 years, they operated the service, completing 153 out of 158 scheduled flights.
I think, I mean, if you are talking about commercial, flying pilot, but otherwise, if you are asking about a pilot in an air force, I guess there is a Bengali gentleman called Indranil Roy, who was Indralal Roy, yeah. So who was a pilot in the Air Force, Royal Air Force, in 1917, in the First World War, I guess.
No, you're quite right. I stand corrected. I'm talking about the first Indian pilot for commercial airmail. Correct. And to fly a scheduled service.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. As far as the pilots who fought in the war, There are quite a few notable people. You named Mr. Roy. Similarly, Manmeet Singh again.
Right.
There were 2, 3 others. So there were several Indians who were in the Royal Air Force during World War I, and they acquitted themselves very, very well with what they did.
Absolutely.
And again, their history is very well recorded. There are good books.
It's philately recorded also in stamps. I think 1998 or somewhere around that, there were some stamps which
Yeah.
was issued also.
Yes.
Since war is a subject of mine, so I have
No,
some.
thank you for pointing that out, indeed. So Delhi Flying Club took over this route, and for 1.5 years they flew the mail from Karachi via Jodhpur to Delhi. Then in July 1933, Indian Transcontinental Airways was formed. They took over from Delhi Flying Club. They had these Armstrong Whitworth planes, and the Athena class. They started flying from Karachi, Jodhpur, Delhi, then Kanpur, Allahabad, Calcutta. They took over the mail, extending it all the way there. The same 2 ana air fee was applicable. So what we see here is a postcard which was flown on the first flight by ITCA from Karachi to Calcutta, and a press photograph of the plane landing at Calcutta, and the card that was printed for the inauguration event. Later on that year, they extended the service to Rangoon in October of 1933. So it flew from Karachi all the way to Calcutta, and then Akyab, Sendove, and then on to Rangoon. And upon arrival in Rangoon, it received this very beautiful, in magenta again, binocular cachet, which was applied on the reverse of these covers. Later on that year in December, they extended all the way to Singapore. So, there's a lot of talk about, Imperial Airways flying mail all the way to Australia, to Singapore. Don't believe that. Imperial Airways ended in Karachi. It is the Indian Transcontinental Airways that took the mail from Karachi up to Singapore. In Singapore, they handed over to Qantas, Queensland and Northern Territory Airway Service. They took it all the way up to Brisbane, handed over to ANA, who took it all the way down to Melbourne and Sydney. Imperial Airways ended. So if you see even the timetables, etc., it will say Imperial Airways. In smaller print, it will say along with Indian Transcontinental Airways. So they were definitely very good at their PR. So later on in 1934 is when the arrangement happened with the Australians to take over the mail, taking it all the way to Australia. So mail from India could also now fly to Australia all the way. And the other event which as Indian philatelists we don't give much importance to, but is very important, is what happens to west of England? How did mail go to America? Until 1939, Indian mail would only go up to England by air, and then it would go by steamer to New York. The Germans had already bridged the North Atlantic much earlier. 1936 they started the Zeppelin service. The Hindenburg would fly carrying mail all the way to Lakehurst in New York. KLM had started the flights. Pan Am had got the route licenses to fly all the way across the British kept trying to delay. Finally, they were ready to start only 1939. Very short-lived service till 5th. It started on 5th August 39, ended in September, because we all know what happened in September 39. A world-changing event, World War II started. So it was just a 1-month service. But here we have a cover which flew on the first flight there. The other very important development in Indian services is in October 1932, Tata Air Services was born. So Tata got the permit, the license to fly mail from Karachi all the way to Madras. So Karachi, Ahmedabad, Bombay, Bellary, Madras. They again had a fleet of 3 pilots, J.R.D. Tata, who was a part-time pilot, Neville Vincent, and Captain Barucha. So these were the 3 pilots, 2 aeroplanes and 2 other employees. They picked up the mail. What we see here on the left are 2 covers which flew. The first one flew from Madras to Karachi, the second one flew from Karachi to Madras. Again, very interesting, you'll see the first cover has the Union Jack, it's red and blue. The second one, Union Jack, is missing, it's in yellow. The story is that Tata's had sanctioned Stephen Smith to produce 2,000 covers according to this design with the Union Jack. By that time, our freedom movement had started gaining a lot of momentum, and this was considered very unpatriotic. Why are you putting a map of India with the Union Jack on the top and doing the rays of the sun in colors of the British flag? Tata came in for a lot of criticism. They withdrew the permission. So by that time about 1100 covers had been sold. Then what they did was they removed the Union Jack, they changed the color to yellow and blue, and another about 700 covers were were sold in this color. So, yeah. And then of course studies have been done how much mail was carried on various stages. If I'm not mistaken, the return stage from Ballari to Bombay or something is one of the rarest stage with only 30-40, but it's all published information, you should get it quite easily. On top we see this, so the Karachi to Bombay flight was flown by J.R.D. Tata. In Bombay it was taken over by Neville Vincent, who flew it via Bellary to Madras and back to Bombay, and then Barucha completed the return flight Bombay to Karachi. Now, interesting fact, what you see here at the bottom is a picture which was published in the newspaper in Madras showing Neville Vincent aeroplane landing in Madras. So the registration number is VTADZ. So for some reason everybody thought that this is the plane which flew the mail from Karachi to Madras. Not true. This is VTADN, sorry. This says VTADN. Not true. J.R.D. Tata flew from Karachi to Madras in VTACZ. It is entered in his logbook. His logbook is published in Murad Faizi's book. You just open the book, you'll see it right there. But even today, you'll see the postage stamp of J.R.D. Tata standing in front of his plane. It will say VTADN. You see Tata's own website, it will show J.R.D. Tata and they'll say VTADN. So this is just a historical inaccuracy here, which is very important to know. Tata did not fly ADN. Neville Vincent flew it from Bombay to Madras. On the top right, you see a cover actually signed by J.R.D. Tata, which flew on the first flight. And on the bottom is a cover signed by Neville Vincent, who also flew on the first flight. Tata then, of course, grew. They really developed civil aviation in India. So by the time they had developed 5 routes. So one was, of course, the Karachi-Madras, which was later extended to Trichy and on to Colombo. The other route was to Travancore. So they were doing Bombay, Goa, Cannanore, Travancore, and they later built a bridge, Travancore to Trichy, to interconnect. They had another route to Delhi. So Bombay, Indore, Gwalior, Bombay, Indore, Bhopal, Gwalior, Delhi. They had a route to Calcutta. So they were able to, by that time, really over the next 5 to 7 years, develop there into a proper commercial airmail service primarily, and also started flying some passengers on their flight. The other airline to take shape at that time was the Indian National Airways. This was promoted by Grant Govan. Govan brothers were the managing agents for Imperial Airways. Again, very fine airline, developed very well, grew very well. So here we see the December 1933, from Calcutta they launched flights to Dhaka and to Rangoon. So these were covers, and then they also did the Karachi-Lahore flight. So this was via Multan, Sukkur, etc., going all the way to Lahore. And from Lahore then it would be distributed to a whole lot of stations to the northwest of India. During this period, few other airlines came up as well. There was a short-lived Madras air taxi service, which flew from Madras to Calcutta via Vijayawada, Vizag, Calcutta, etc. Then there was Air Services of India. Gujarat again was very difficult to completely navigate by surface because of the way the tides and the terrain were. So they had launched a service there. Then we have the Deccan Airways, which was started by the Nizam of Hyderabad in joint venture with the Tatas. They were flying from Hyderabad to Bangalore, to Madras, to Coimbatore, etc. Ambika Airways was started by the Shipping Corporation. So there were various airlines, and civil aviation in India really started to take shape. And then, of course, the big event happens, World War II. World War II, all civil aviation was severely restricted. Aircraft was acquisitioned for war purposes. Priority was given for movement of troops, for movement of material, for movement of military mail, and only where available civilian mail was transferred by air. Everything had moved to surface. So we are moving to this chapter on World War II, I'd like to just 2 minutes move away from airmail and give a little bit of context, because as you go into World War II airmail, this will help you to enjoy your collection a little more. So from a postal standpoint, 2-3 important things happened. One is big impact on routes and rates, which we will cover in the next 3-4 slides. But second is postal relations were suspended with several countries. So with all the Axis countries, enemy countries and enemy occupied countries, postal relations were suspended. So Germany and by extension Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, similarly Italy, mail was suspended completely. The other thing, very strict postal censorship was imposed. So wherever mail would move in and out of the country, it had to pass through the censorship. So censor stations were set up, particularly if you see on the northwest and later in the northeast. Northeast was very important because two things were happening there. One is it was very much in the interest of the Allies to keep China in the war. Japan in 1937 had invaded Manchuria. So there was a Japanese army fighting in Manchuria, and the Chinese were keeping 1 million Japanese soldiers busy up there. Out of a 2.5 million army of Japanese, 1 million were there. They said, we've got to keep them occupied. So the Americans were giving tremendous aid to the Chinese. The other thing happening is Chiang Kai-shek was also fighting the communists. Mao was getting more and more popular. So he was fighting two battles with the Japanese and with the communist Chinese. So the Americans created this amazing route, which is called over the hump, flying over the Himalayas to fly supplies to China. And for that they developed a lot of air bases, airfields, etc. in Assam. Now wherever these were there, sensor stations were set up because that was very, very sensitive. The other thing, of course, was Azad Hind Fauj by that time had developed a lot of following. The British were really afraid that Indian army may defect completely to Azad Hind. The Japanese were active in Southeast Asia. They had already reached Burma. India was the next target. So a lot of censorship was introduced in the Northeast as well at that time. So just talking about censorship marks. So we start with the first series, which starts with the triangular mark you see here, with the name of the station mentioned, Calcutta, Delhi, Karachi, Bombay, whatever were there. And not all mail was opened. Only certain mail had to be opened. Rest was stamped unopened. So everybody knew it has not passed through by mistake. Then they said, no, why should we give away the name of the city? Let us introduce codes. So then each station was given a code. So Calcutta was given a code A. So when you see here D means Madras. So this was censored in Madras. So this is the way the codes were given, and the not opened again carried the station code. Later on, in 1942, what they wanted to do was harmonize censorship through the British Empire. So then DH was the empire code allotted to India. So each country, so Burma was given DG, for example, India was DH. And then the third alphabet there was the city code. So if you see here, DHT. Yeah, so DHT, T is not listed here. That was a later code allotted to Delhi, just for a very short while. So it says that this was censored in India in Delhi, and similarly R. R was a later code that was allotted. They were set up in places like Coimbatore, Hyderabad, and places like that. And then for the Northeast, special censorship was done. First the what is called inland censorship, later the special censorship. These marks were produced. Also because of the shortage of aircraft and the restriction on mail, that started the aircraft service. So it's a subject in itself. I will not go into that right now, not in today's talk. But aircraft censorship was also introduced, and we see here the aircraft censorship marks, again with the similar coding system. So now coming to the impact of World War II on airmail. So the first thing that happened is in September, the all-up airmail scheme, the Empire airmail scheme was suspended. So the 2.5 anna rate was cancelled, the 14 anna rate was introduced. Other than that, the period from September 39 to June 40 is often called the phony war, the fake war, because people never felt anything. During this period, Germany was busy with Eastern Europe, Central Europe fighting there. Nothing was happening that affected the British. Nothing was happening that affected India. So mail from India to England also was continuing the same way across the Mediterranean, across Egypt, across Western Europe, all the way to Britain. And only thing was the rate had become 14 anna. In June 1940 and July 1940, two things happened. One is the fall of France. France capitulated in June 1940. Italy joined the war on the side of the Germans in July 1940. Because of that, suddenly the Mediterranean route stopped. So that was when the horseshoe route was created. For the same 14 anna rate, the mail from India to England would now go to Cairo. It would then go all the way to south, to Durban. And then it would go by ship from Durban along the South Atlantic and North Atlantic to Britain. That was the horseshoe route that was created for the same 14 anna rate. Also what they did was, this was a slow service, and again because a lot of war going on in that part, even in Egypt, etc., it was very irregular. A letter could reach in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. There was no guarantee. By the time a route was found over the Pacific. So what had happened was Pan Am had extended their service, which was going earlier from San Francisco to Manila, which was going from San Francisco to Honolulu, to Midway, to Guam, to Manila. They had extended that all the way to Hong Kong. And Imperial Airways, which had become BOAC by now, 1940 it became BOAC, was flying all the way up to Hong Kong. So they were able to exchange mail. So they created a route from India to England, which would go by BOAC to Hong Kong, by Pan Am to San Francisco, by United across America all the way to New York, and then by sea to Britain. And the rate was a very expensive 40 annas. So still 2.5 anna was the letter rate, 40 anna air fee, 42 anna was the cost of sending an airmail letter to Britain, which still had to go by sea over the North Atlantic. Then in December 1940, this also got sorted out. Pan Am was able to build the route which would go via Lisbon. Lisbon was a neutral country, so they would fly via the Azores, go to Lisbon, and then KLM by that time had relocated to Britain as part of World War II. So KLM aircraft were used to transport the mail from Lisbon all the way to Britain. And now the rate was a 69.5 anna for the mail to be carried. The letter rate was now 3.5 anna. 66 anna was the air fee. And you could actually send a letter. So you see the route here is very interesting. It would go up to Rangoon by Indian Transcontinental Airways. From Rangoon it would go up to Hong Kong by CNAC, China National Airways Corporation, which was created by the Chiang Kai-shek's government and Pan Am. From there it would be given to Pan Am, which would fly it all the way up to San Francisco, United, and then again by the Pan Am route via Lisbon and KLM on to Britain. So this is a World War II, and all of this happened in the short period of 2 years. Because December 1941, what happens? Pearl Harbor, Pacific shutdown. So back to the horseshoe route. And then of course they found ways to shorten the horseshoe route, didn't have to go all the way to south. They stopped somewhere near Accra, they started routing mail going across Ghana, etc. But basically the 2 years of the Trans-Pacific mail is again a fabulous period when you study Indian air mails. The other thing I must mention before ending World War II period is the Qantas. How do you reach mail to Australia? You're able to get it up to Karachi. But again, if you see what the Japanese were doing by that time in Southeast Asia, they had taken Singapore, then they had taken Malaya, they had taken Burma. They were knocking at the door of India to get in here. It was impossible to fly mail the traditional route. So these people, Qantas said, we will take over. BOAC will deliver the mail to me in Colombo, and we will fly from Colombo to Perth. This was the longest unbroken route over sea. And we will fly at night in dead silence. No radios, no navigating beacon, no radar, nothing. Only fly by dead reckoning, which means all you have are the stars, you have the compass. There is no other visual indicator. And you have to estimate how much is the wind, what is the drift, where you are going, etc. And somehow or the other, God help you, you have to end up in Perth, flying over the entire Indian Ocean. So they launched these services. First they were using the Catalinas, later they were using the Liberators. And BOAC could not keep up their end of it. They could not deliver mail in Karachi. So Qantas then took over the mail in Karachi itself. Karachi, Colombo, Colombo to Australia. So again, please look for mail flown on these Catalinas and Liberators. It's a fabulous story. With this we move to what happens at the end of World War II. At the end of World War II, now this is the phenomenally interesting period in Indian civil aviation and in Indian airmail. All kinds of airlines started to proliferate. So we've talked about before, we've seen Indian National Airways, we've seen Tata, we've seen Air Services India, etc. Several other airlines started at that time. So you see Dalmia Jain here. Dalmia Jain had started a service from Calcutta to Delhi, which they extended to Srinagar. You have Orient Airways. Orient Airways was started headquartered in Calcutta. After the partition, they chose to relocate to Pakistan, and they started flying mail from Dhaka to Karachi. And this later became PIA, Pakistan International Airways. What you have here is Bharat Airways. Bharat Airways was a Birla Brothers airline, and they were flying, they had Skymaster planes. So they were flying to Singapore, they were flying to Bangkok, Hong Kong, all the way up to Tokyo. So they had started services. You had Himalayan Airways, which had started mail from Bombay going to Kabul and Kandahar. So this was a great time. So many different airlines, so many airports. Suddenly civilians could start to travel by air. All of that started in this period. One of the main reasons, the big boost for this was the Americans had brought hundreds and hundreds of C-47, Douglas C-47 aircraft. The passenger version is called the Dakota DC-3s. They brought them here. They had nothing to do with it after the war. So these were being sold for literally 10,000 rupees each. So, Mr. Paria, you want to start an airline, pay 10,000 rupees and buy the plane. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why lots and lots of airlines started at that time. Civil aviation got a big boost. It had certain downside, and I will come to that also. The other big event that happens is June 1948, Air India International is born. So independence in August 47. A few months after that, Pandit Nehru gets a letter from Mr. Tata that now we are a free country. Should the Indian flag not fly all over the world? Should we not start an Indian airline? Mr. Nehru gave permission, and Air India International was born. Again, common misconception, Air India belonged to Tatas. No, not true. Air India International was the first successful example of public-private partnership. Tata owned 25%. Government of India owned 49% with an option to buy 2% at their will. And the remaining was owned by other shareholders. Tata was given management rights. It is to the credit of Government of India that they gave a free hand to Tata to develop Air India the way they wanted. But Air India, as we call it, Air India International was the name of the airline. Tata domestic airline was called Air India Limited. That was a Tata airline, not this one. But this was managed by Tata. Anyway, this was born 8 June 1948. Very big event for Indians. Our first international airline. And a postage stamp was issued to commemorate this. The postal department printed this cover with the tricolor. This was given free. Anybody could go to the post office, you buy a stamp, you get a cover free. They made special arrangements that you could post mail to Cairo, Geneva, London, and we'll send it back to you as a souvenir to keep with you. Air India also printed special covers. What you see here on the left is a cover printed by Air India that flew on that flight. And it is estimated that about 65,000 letters were carried on this flight. So again, very collectible, very affordable, very easily available, but something for us to be proud of. Return flight, London to Bombay, for some strange reason, very limited mail was carried. Here you see a return flight cover. The difference is the first one says Bombay, Cairo, Geneva, London. The other one says London, Geneva, Cairo, Bombay. So here the exact quantity is not known. Various estimates have been made. I would personally estimate about between 50 to 100 mail was carried on the return flight, whether picked up from London to here. There were also some mail from Geneva, and Cairo mail, very, very limited quantity is reported. The other two very defining events that happened in Indian airmail history were in 1949. Rafi Ahmad Kidwai was our Minister of Communication. Postal Department came under him, and he introduced the night airmail service in January 1949. So what would happen is aircraft would take off more or less simultaneously from Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, Madras, all converge at Nagpur. And then mail would be exchanged up there and they would fly back to their respective origin. So you could actually post a letter in any of these cities in the afternoon or at the airport in the evening, and it would be delivered to any of these other four cities the next morning. This was a very big development that happened for the popularity of airmail. The other thing that he did is in 1st April 1949 is all up airmail. So again, abolish the airmail surcharge. For the price of ordinary letter, surface letter, you could send mail by air. So these were the two very positive developments that happened very soon after independence to give a boost to Indian airmail. Now, I talked about the 10,000 rupee plane and the various airlines. Now, this is what the map of Indian aviation looked like in 1952. There were about 8 to 10 different airlines flying. Very often, if you see the Bombay-Calcutta route, for example, you'll find 4 airlines are flying on the same route. So they were competing for passengers, they were competing for mail, they were competing for freights. The prices were dropping unreasonably low. One of the people, I think Dalmia Jain, is reputed to have bought these military aircraft, not even put seats. They put benches. There was no safety equipment. There were all kinds of crashes. Again, as a student of air crash, I find the 1951 to 1953 period is bereft with crashes. Planes were crashing left, right and center. They were flying night airmail. You didn't have night landing facility. You didn't have navigation facility. All kinds of crazy stuff was happening. It was a very, very dangerous period. So finally, 1st August 1953, Government of India decided enough is enough. Let's nationalize Indian air transport. So Air India, all the domestic airlines, all of them became 100% property of Government of India. And then the 8 different airlines were merged and Indian Airlines Corporation was born. So suddenly the map becomes a lot cleaner, one airline flying on the single route, etc. And Indian Airlines, of course, then grew very, very well over the years. They moved from Dakotas, they got Viscounts, they got later on they got the Caravels, they got the Boeing 737s, and really developed into a national carrier. Also, every time there was an exigency, every time there was a need, it is Indian Airlines and Air India that stood up to the challenge. You take the liberation of Goa. Just 1 month after the liberation of Goa, Indian Airlines started flights and postals carrying airmail to Goa. Similarly, if you go even much more later, or even before that, if you take let's go later when Iraq invaded Kuwait, the entire airlift which was done, all the Indian refugees from Amman were flown to India by whom? By Air India. It's similarly when our cricket team was stranded in Jamaica, Air India sent a plane to bring them back to India. So it is these airlines which have done tremendous work for us. And just the last part of my chapter 1, Air India then of course grew from strength to strength over the years.
In 1955, Air India was taken over by the Government of India.
1953, August 1953, it became 100% owned by Government of India.
What happened to Air India?
So all of air transport was nationalized. All the domestic carriers were merged into a single airline called Indian Airlines Corporation. No. 1953, 1st August 1953, Indian Airlines was born. For international, there was only one airline at that time, Air India. So it retained the same name, Air India International, but the ownership changed from 49% Government of India to 100% Government of India. It is again to their credit that until 1986, they asked Mr. Tata to continue as chairman, and he graciously continued without 1 rupee salary. Chairman of Tata Sons would devote 50% of his time to Air India, building it into what became during the 60s, 70s till mid 80s the finest airline in the world. Again, something for us to be proud of. So Air India developed their routes in the 1954 to 1961 period in 5 different directions. So they had the route to London and they would take various detours over Europe. They had the service via Aden all the way to Nairobi, the Africa route. Then they started the route to Japan, so Calcutta, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Tokyo. Then they started the service to Australia, again Singapore, Jakarta to Sydney. And they started the service via Tashkent to Moscow. So these were the 5 different directions, and this was all using Lockheed and later Lockheed Constellation aircraft. 1961 they entered the jet age. They bought the Boeing 707, and then of course the golden years started, the Boeing 707 period, and then in 1971 the jumbo jets, and 25 years of glorious history, but I'm not covering this here simply because I wanted to cover the earlier part. So with this, yes. That is correct. All civil aviation was nationalized in 1953. So now I have got 3 appendix here. I would like to go through the appendix. One is several people here are exhibitors. I just have a slide here for the aerophilately class. On the right hand side is how the scoring is done. Treatment, philatelic importance. This is not very different from scoring in most of the other chapters. But what few things I would like to say for exhibitors is, one is the most important, and it's something I as an exhibitor neglected at least for the first 3 to 4 years, is read the SREVs. Read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times, read it 4 times, take a highlighter, pen, notepad. The more you read it, the better your exhibit will be. Please read it very carefully. What is the definition of an airmail exhibit? What material is permitted? What is not permitted? Please read that very carefully, and how to structure an exhibit and how to build the chronology. This is very important. The other thing that is very, very important as an exhibitor is your title page. Please give a lot of importance to the title page. Jury never has time to see the full exhibit. They're going to spend 5 minutes. You've spent 3 months and doing great stuff and rare material and all of that. Out of the 5 minutes, they spend half the time seeing the title page. They just browse through the rest for any highlights that you may put up, and that's the end of it. So title page must have, these are not optional. You cannot have 5 out of 7 or something. You need every one of these. In your title page, you must have the title, the short and precise general information about your exhibit, the purpose for your exhibit, the scope, what is included, what is not included, the plan, how you are going to use your exhibit, what is the flow, show any research that you have done, demonstrate that very clearly, and give the relevant references and literature. Ideally, I would encourage everybody to build a synopsis, send it in advance. Some of the jury I know take great trouble to pick out the reference material from the synopsis, refer to it, and be prepared to judge your exhibit. The other is condition is important. So for example, here I have shown you some material which is of very ordinary condition, but that is not exhibit grade. That is good for a awareness program orientation. In an exhibit, your material has to be very good condition, unless it is so rare that that is the best available condition. And please avoid repetition. Don't take one flight. It's not a catalog, so please don't put one flight, all the stages. Don't repeat. I mean, what you're telling the jury is I have nothing else to tell you. Don't keep blank spaces. Again, you're trying to say I don't have material. So please fill your exhibit. The other thing is, this is a little personal to me. that I find people I talk to, what do you, aerophilately, what do you collect? First flight covers. What else? First flight covers. Aerophilately equal to first flight. So I would just like to share with you some different dimensions, how you can collect airmail, what are the things that you can do. So one is, of course, first flight covers, that's how everybody starts. So here's a first flight cover, from India going all the way to South Africa on the Africa service of Imperial Airways. You could continue to do that. Or what you could do is you could collect airmail stamps. Again, here you see this stamp, the Pussmoth, here, VTADN. Even the JRD Tata stamp standing behind is in VTADN. Galat hai, please don't. Yeah, but collect stamps, or you can collect labels. You see, this is so interesting. Deccan Air label, KLM label, mail to India. You see here on top, here is a registered AD card on which there is a postal department sticker telling people that you can get airmail label free of cost from the post office and use it for your airmail. This is another way to get to know more about airmail. First day covers with airmail stamps. So the Air India stamp, again the interesting story to it, but very briefly, it was on sale from 29th May to 6th of June 1948, and mail was to be carried on 8th of June. Post office was given strict instructions. Don't cancel it, anything, just send it to Bombay, Philatelic Bureau will put the 8th June cancellation. But where is this? Kanpur, not surprising. This guy goes to the post office in Kanpur, he puts the stamp, he has the turmeric to get it registered. Kanpur post office registered it and sent it to Canada, and there's a Ottawa arrival mark of 3rd of June or 5th of June at the other end. So actually this is the first day cover of 29th May. So again, a lot of airmail stamps, first day covers can be collected. Pilot signed covers, this is again a great way to collect. Look for first flight covers, but look for those bearing signature of pilots. Who are these people? Whether it is the foreign airlines, international or Indian. So many Indian pilots were there. R.N. Chawla, Batra, the Sharma brothers, Prabhu Dutt and Brahma Dutt. Of course, very, very tragic story. The two brothers died in an air crash. Two separate aeroplanes they were flying. One was flying from Karachi to Lahore carrying the mail. The other was flying to Delhi. Both crashed, both died. Now, it's a bit of a mystery what happened. The newspaper reports, the court of inquiry says the planes crashed into each other. People find it hard to believe. They were very, very seasoned pilots, very experienced pilots. And they took off actually almost 5 minutes apart from each other. Very hard to imagine they would have crashed. Story is there was a conspiracy because this pilot going to Delhi, Prabhu Dutt Sharma, was flying there. He was carrying an American oil company executive, was going there to sign a contract. The conspiracy theory says that the British put a bomb on the plane and they didn't know which plane he would fly. There were two planes, so they put it on both. And the two went off because even the wreckage was found 5 miles apart from each other. But again, this is coming back to Indian pilots. It's again something really to study. On the right hand side is a real fun cover. This is the last flight of Vistara Airways last year in September. And this was actually one of our members, Akhil Reddy. He and his wife Soma, they flew, 2 nights they didn't sleep. They prepared the cover for us. They flew to Cochin. They took the night flight because in the daytime he worked in the office. From office he takes the middle of the night flight to Cochin, goes to Cochin post office the next day, and he puts the stamp there, gets the Cochin synagogue permanent pictorial cancellation there. Same evening he takes the last flight. Last flight means 11:30 at night, which Vistara flew as a UK code flight. Took that flight, goes there, takes the signature of the pilots on the cover, lands up in Bangalore the next day, goes to Vidhan Sauda and obtains a permanent pictorial cancellation there. Again, just a fun cover to collect. Pilot said, I'm so tired, I've flown 5 flights, I'll only sign 2 covers for you or something like that. But these covers without the pilot's signature were sent to all AMSI members as a souvenir that day. The other thing to collect is crash mail. Again, crash mail is very interesting. Here you have a cover. Air India, the Malabar Princess, the first flight that flew Bombay-London on 8 June 1948. In November 1950, was flying Indian sailors from Bombay to England to join their ship in Southampton. Landing in Geneva is a very treacherous landing because you're going over the Alps and then you have to get into Geneva. When you cross the peak, there is a severe downdraft which pulls the plane down. These planes anyway have an altitude ceiling, so they can't fly very high. So you have the Alps, you have the ceiling, within that you're flying. It got sucked because of the downdraft and crashed into a glacier. So immediately after that, a rescue attempt was made. The first sack of mail was recovered in December 1950, which was from Cairo. So here is a letter from Cairo to England, which was recovered. This is a cover which actually survived the crash. The post office then puts it in this, what is called an ambulance cover. They said this is too fragile, too damaged to travel on its own. I'll send it in an ambulance. So they put it in this ambulance cover and then sent it on to the addressee. Later on in April, when the snow had thawed, the second recovery was made, and then a lot more mail was recovered, and recovery has gone on and on and on. By sheer twist of fate, in 1966, a Boeing 707, the Kanchenjunga, crashes while landing into the Air India plane, crashes while landing into Geneva in the same place, the Boson Glacier at Mont Blanc. That was the plane carrying Dr. Homi Bhabha. Again, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. He was going to attend the Atomic Energy Conference in Vienna. From London, he was headed there. Don't know what it is. But even today, documents. In fact, the person whom I've developed a friendship with is a Swiss policeman who's retired. He lives at the foothills of the Boson Glacier. Even as recently as 10 days ago, he has found a piece of the fuselage of the Malabar Princess, of the interior of the cabin, and he sent me photographs. Whole lot of souvenirs he sent me. He sent me aircraft parts recovered from the 707, newspapers recovered from the diplomatic pouch, all kinds. It's a little grotesque, but somebody's hand, somebody's leg. Even today, as the glacier melts, they keep coming down at the bottom of the village. There's a restaurant and bar set up there called the Malabar Princess. That fellow found the nose wheel. He's put it as a souvenir up there. The government of India later created this memorial, what you see here, for the crash victims, and there was a small ceremony there which went there to pay homage to the crash victims as well. So you could do. The other thing, again, very interesting, is collect routes and rates. So why does a letter, have 5 anna postage, 2 anna letter rate, 3 anna air fee? Why did it become 8 anna? So suddenly the Cairo-Basra service, they gave you an option. I can also accelerate it from Marseille to London. So the ship that would go, it would offload all the mail in Marseille. It would then travel overland by train, then by ferry to England. Instead of that, we can accelerate by 1 day, pay me 3 annas more, I'll carry it on that. So study of routes and rates is again something very, very interesting. We took the World War II period again, very good period to study. Auxiliary markings. So, this one says insufficiently paid for India-London air service. What does India-London air service mean? What if somebody says Karachi-London? In what way is Karachi-London different from India-London? How does it affect the postal rate? How does it affect the route the letter travelled at? These are again fabulous subjects to go deeper and deeper into. Again, there are books written on this, on Jusqua markings, India Study Circle. They have an archive of 70 years of India Post. Lots of very good articles there. You have clubs, you have auxiliary marking clubs, which is completely dedicated to study of auxiliary markings. But it's again, all I'm trying to say is it goes beyond first flight, around the mail, around the world mail. Here is the first time a letter could travel around the mail by air. The first time was in May 1937, when there was only one gap, which is Manila to Hong Kong. Just imagine the whole world you could traverse by air except Manila, Hong Kong. So when Pan Am extended that in 1937, mail could travel around the world. Here is the cover that started from America, came around the world, to all the way to India, got franked in India, and went to Europe, and was supposed to go on the Hindenburg all the way back to America to complete the round the world journey, to become the first cover. It could not do that because the previous flight the Hindenburg crashed. Not only that, I've written an article on this. I've got a QR code. It's like a detective story. How the cover goes behind schedule, it's going to miss the flight, what happens, how it is able to make the flight, what mistake did he make, why did he address it to Bombay? He lost 2 days because of Bombay. Had he addressed it to Calcutta, Karachi, anywhere in the route, he would have saved 2 days, made it. It reaches 2 days after the Zeppelin was to go. But Zeppelin got delayed. Why? George VI got coronated in England. They wanted to fly the newsreels to show in the theatre in England. So they told Zeppelin, wait, I'm sending you the reels to Germany, delay by 2 days. All that happened, Hindenburg catches fire, flight gets cancelled. And whom is this letter addressed to? Captain Max Pruss. He was the commander of the Hindenburg, which crashed. He suffered severe burns. 6 months he was in the Presbyterian Hospital in New York. So therefore this letter is finally delivered to him. It was lying in Germany waiting for him in Frankfurt. After he comes back 6 months later, then it completes the journey and reaches the addressee in America. So again, round the world, and there's plenty of examples around the world. Underpaid airmail again. This cover has a story. What is the story on this cover? You see all these different markings. What do they mean? So study of underpaid airmail is again very interesting. How much is the franking? What does the label say? Is there a Jusqua mark? There's a pencil 1 upon 5. What does 1 upon 5 mean? Then there is a T with a circle and there's a 5C written there. What is this 5C? 5 centimes. What does that mean? Then you see another rubber stamp at the bottom. Half D ISK. Halfpenny Inland Section Kensington. What does that mean? Then there is a halfpenny label. So postage rates, postage due, underpaid airmail again. It's a fantastic subject. Go deeper into that. Again, there are books written on it. There are articles on postage due. On this particular cover, I have also made a short video which I have put up in the YouTube channel. There's a postage due mail study group. For wartime, there is a civil censorship study group. These are great clubs to join to increase your knowledge, to build your circle of friends. Then of course we have rocket mail. Stephen Smith rocket mail. Markand is going to speak later. We'll wait for him to cover it. Space mail. India has now got a 40-year history of space. What about Indian space mail? Astrophilately. That's a great subject to collect. Then Zeppelin mail. Zeppelin never came to India. The closest it came was when the airship R101 was scheduled to fly from England, from Cardington all the way to Karachi. The station was built in Karachi. What you see here is the airship hangar that was built in Karachi called Kala Chhapra. This is the size bigger than a football field. It's huge. And if you see by comparison at the back, the mooring mast where the airship was supposed to park, the passenger station and the hydrogen plant at the back of it. Unfortunately, it takes off from England. It crashes at Beauvais over France. So never made it beyond that to Australia and India. That is the closest. But here is an example of mail. And fortunately, it did not carry mail. Here is an example of mail that was prepared to be carried on the R101 that did not get carried to India. But here is mail that was carried on earlier Zeppelin flights, addressed to, Zeppelin went up to Egypt, Palestine, etc. And then it came by conventional route to India. Catapult mail. What is catapult mail? The South Atlantic was impossible to bridge at that time in the early to mid 1930s because aircraft did not have the range. So what the Germans did was very ingenious. They positioned 2 ships in the Atlantic Ocean, the Westfalen and the Schwabenland. And you would fly these Dornier wall planes. They would fly from Ghana. They would fly and they would land in the sea near the ship. They had a crane with what they called the hind mats. They would lift it by mat onto the plane. They would refuel it and then they would catapult it at great speed because it was full. If it was not catapulted, it would be very difficult to take off from the sea. So they would catapult it off the ship. Similarly, the other ship was positioned outside the coast of Brazil. And when it came close to ending the range, it would land there and it would catapult and then fly all the way to Pernambuco, where the mail was delivered. So again, examples of Indian mail flown by catapult flights. It gives you a whole new subject of study, research to go deeper and deeper into. Very interesting subject to look at. Pigeon Mail, Pratisad. He is the person who's published the complete catalogue on pigeon mail. First the Stephen Smith experiments, later done the modern pigeon mail. Again, very interesting subject. A lot of material is commonly available, a lot of material is rare. You can absolutely do that. And I cannot end without Mr. Bayanwala's favorite subject, helicopter mail. Again, it's a very, very understudied subject, but it's very, very interesting. Mail was sent by helicopter at different periods over different parts of the country, how it was done, why it was done, and mail carried on that. And not all of it was easily marked. So you have to be able to study it to get to it. That's a great subject. So with this, I'll go to the third part, third appendix, and I'm going to end shortly. Thank you very much for all your patience. Is for people who are interested in more, some very good reference books. If you have to buy one book to get Indian Airmail, it is this one. Indian Airmail by Jeffrey Brown, published by India Study Circle. It's available as a CD, which means it is digitally searchable. It has all the information you need. Amazing, absolutely. This is the one that is a must-have. One second, sorry. The second one is a little more detail. He published the postage rates up to 1956. After 1947, there are better resources, I'll come to that, but up to 1947, this is probably the best reference you will get on the postage rates. And then, of course, Peter Vingent has published 2 volumes, part 1, part 2 of Imperial Airways. He has sat down in the newspaper offices and pulled out information of every single flight from 1927 to 1939. Every single Imperial Airways flight from England to India to Australia, and similarly he's done one from Cairo to Africa, giving huge information, how the routes evolved, how they changed, which aircraft was used, what the timetables were, and any cover you have from India to England of that period, using this book you can get a lot of precise information. So for people who want to go deeper into it, these 2 books are again definitely worth having. The other digital websites, of course, I talk about postage rates, 1947 to 57. Mr. Bayanwala's information, which is available on the net, is absolutely the most perfect go-to reference for the ANA period, 1947 to 57 postage rates. Abhishek Bwalka has taken all the postal notices after that and extended it from 57 onwards. So that is again available. It's on the net, but these QR codes are here. If anybody wants to refer to them, I'll be happy to provide them offline. Then we have put up a few websites on Indian Airmails. We talked about the Jusqua markings, the barcodes, the special that India, England, Karachi, England, etc. It's all on this website, Jusqua marking. This is actually the work of a Dutch person called Jan Terwel. He has actually published a book on worldwide markings, which he has given me permission to digitize and put here. I have added a lot more information of India there. Air India Collector website has got the bibliography, almost 200 books on Indian aerophilately, global aerophilately, postal notices, etc. And stamp exhibiting website is where we list all the different stamp exhibitions, post the entry form, the IREX, the commissioner details, later on all the results, all of that is like a resource for exhibitors. So please do that. And with this I come to the end of my presentation. We founded the Airmail Society. Those who are interested can join. It's a 3-minute process, joining Airmail Foundation. Literally filling up the form, making the online payment takes you 3 minutes, and it will cost you 1,000 rupees a year. You get very little in return, but you are supporting Indian Airmail cause. We try to stay relevant, we try to do interesting things. We have a Zoom meeting which we are having every month. The next Zoom meeting is very important, 29th of June, Sunday afternoon. Glenn Stafford, he is a FIP jury fellow and he is the chairman of the FIP Aerophilatelic Commission. He is doing a 2-hour workshop on aerophilatelic exhibiting. These meetings are open to all. These are not members only. Anybody can join, and anybody interested in exhibiting, not only aerophilately, will find it very, very useful. He's going to give a jury perspective, how a jury looks at an exhibit, please, I would encourage everybody to join. We come out with special covers. Even now, when our Mr. Sharma Shukla takes off to go to the International Space Station, we have a cover ready and waiting. We will be publishing that. We did one on World Airmail Day, etc. These are given to all our members. Our mission is to celebrate World Airmail Day, 18th February every year, to get India more and more recognized on the world map, and holding MCPEX, which is a virtual international exhibition. We held our first in February. This year we'll be holding our next in February next year. I have here some material. There's just a report on the last MCPEX that we have to give you an idea of what we are doing. And we also have a very active YouTube channel. It's called Hawa Se by Air. And we've already got 25 videos. We have 25 videos already posted here. And we are trying to do something every month. Put one new video on some interesting topic to do with Indian Airmail. Please subscribe to the channel as well. So with this, I must thank all of you for your patience. It's a rather long talk. I just could not find a way to make it shorter. Thank you very much.